Welcome to the second episode of Make Hazmat Great Again. We've got two special guests today. Chief Andy Seers from Creve Corps, also the St. Louis County Hazmat Commander, and we've got Matt Booth, a personal friend of mine. They're both personal friends, but Matt Booth, I got to brag on Matt for a second and Andy. But Matt, literally one of the smartest guys I've ever met in the fire service. Great guy, very good personal friend of mine. Glad to know him, and he put up with me being his partner for a couple of years, so he deserves a special spot in heaven. But also, Andy Sears, personal friend of mine, kind of a day one guy as far as the hazmat's concerned for St. Louis County, and privileged to work with him, and as well as Kyle. Unfortunately, Kyle wasn't able to make it on the first episode because he was running a trench collapse. He was working that day, unfortunately, but now we got him here. He's the co-host. He's the other 50% of this thing that we decided to come up with. So, welcome everybody, and
Love it.
go with some introductions here. We'll start with Kyle.
So yeah, sorry I missed the first one. We got the computer up and everything up and running, and then had to bail to go run some calls. Kyle Sanders, battalion training officer and captain over at Metro West Fire District. So me and Nick started brainstorming, building some training stuff, and here we are now, kind of working through all this. So about 20 years in the fire service altogether. Really didn't get into the hazmat stuff until a few years ago, and this call here we're getting ready to discuss is one of the big ones that kind of life-changing for me, of getting thrown into this and really realizing what I didn't know and where I need to be. So linked up with Nick and started really hammering some stuff away over the last year or so.
Right on.
That's great.
How about you, Matt?
Matt Booth, currently work at Creve Corps Fire. 24 years on the job. I worked 10 years at a small municipal apartment, Ladue, in St. Louis County before I came to Creve Corps, which is also in St. Louis County. Been a private backstepper my whole life, but proud of that. I try to be a decent asset to the department. I've been on the hazmat team 8 or 9-ish years, I guess. I don't remember the exact date. But yeah, this call in particular, it ran a couple entries with Nick before this call. Unfortunately, Nick was not with us on this day.
Yeah, I was on vacation.
Yeah.
Go figure.
But yeah, this was a big one, and happy to be here and talk about it.
Awesome. Welcome. You're up, Andy.
Oh, all right. Andy Seers. I have. I currently work for the Creve Corps Fire District. I've been on the job. This is my 35th year on the job. I worked 10 for a small municipal fire department, kind of like Matt, a different one, but in the same area. And I've been with Creve Corps for 25 years. I've been a hazmat tech for the last 25 years since I came on with Creve Corps. Have grown up a lot in the hazmat team as far as how we go about our business, what we do. I serve, I'm a firefighter paramedic that serves in the role right now as assistant chief for our fire department. And I also, as I like to say, I missed the wrong meeting and I got put in charge of the hazmat team about 5 years ago. And while that has been a huge stretch, it has been one of the most interesting times. I have so much of leaning into this. It changes your perspective when you're no longer the guy who's getting in the suit going down range, but you're the guy telling everybody to get in the suit and go down range. And that really that changes your perspective of how this goes, and wanting to be competent in knowing what you're doing. And there's been a lot of people that, including guys on this panel, specifically Nick, that has poured into me with his expertise and allowed me to grow and shown me so many things that I had no idea I didn't even know. So while I've got a long way to go to to get good at this hazmat thing. I have learned a ton, and proud to be here and have learned again. I learned so much on this call. This was a significant response that we had, and so many lessons to glean from it. I'm grateful we're sharing it here today.
Right on. So, I guess we'll start out with what was the setup on this? Like I said, I was on vacation, so I don't really remember. I remember getting a phone call, kind of asking like, "Where you at?" type of thing. But so I remember, was it
I
summertime?
think that was me.
Yeah, maybe could have been.
It was
What?
September 19th, 2020 is when we ran this call. It came in, had an engine company respond on a chemical leak in a building. They got there, talked to the representative that was on site, and he said they had a small ammonia leak, and they would just need one person to come by in a suit and turn the switch for them, and that would take care of the call. So that's literally how this thing started to happen. They reached out to Chief Digman, who was handling the duty at the time, the special ops or the hazmat duty at the time. He gave me a call. We said, yeah, I don't feel very comfortable with a small ammonia leak. And we started putting the team and responding the team. Which that, as far as the response on that turned out to be our main hazmat vehicle, the HM23, which responds out of Creve Coeur House 1, our Firehouse 1, both of our decon units, necessarily because we need that much decon, but that gave us more hazmat technicians on the scene. Through Chief Digman, he then had Kyle's unit 3344 dispatched and respond with us. So we had a pretty our normal, what we would have a significant response of personnel that was coming. As far as hazmat techs, we probably had 16, 18 hazmat techs on scene. But then in turn, we also stress that we weren't sure that we had enough for this. So that was kind of the makeup and the start of this when the call came in.
Understood. And Matt, were you on HM23 or did you come in on something else?
Yeah, I was assigned in the initial response on HM23.
Okay, gotcha. And Kyle, you were on 3344, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Now, we came in pretty later to the call. They already had hazmat techs getting geared up and stuff by the time we got all the way up there.
Right.
So,
okay.
But it's kind of funny with you being off. I was actually on a trade day that day for he's a battalion chief now, Chief Moore. He was a captain then, but he's, for us in Metro West, he's kind of the leader with our hazmat program.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working trade time for him during that day. So I did the same thing, texting him afterwards. I'm like, hey, like, you're the hazmat guru and you completely missed this great call. We got to go.
That's right.
Yeah, life career call for us. So
Yeah, that was the call. Like I've said that before, the call of a career, no doubt. So as far as like the lead up to it, just a normal day, right? Normal staffing, pretty much what we say normal, you know.
Yes.
And let's see here, what any other details en route, or was it just, hey, we got an ammonia leak?
We had a small ammonia leak, right? I mean, that literally was it as we were rolling in.
Gotcha. And so when you got there, who got there first? Was it Andy or was it you guys, Matt?
I had actually Chief Zeitz, who's one of our chief officers on the hazmat team, was out and just happened to be close, and his units from his department, part of the team, were coming as well. And so he was the first one to arrive on scene. I arrived shortly thereafter. He did.
Understood. And did you
And
go ahead?
go ahead. No, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to ask, did you end up talking to the first arriving company or any site representatives or anything like that
So
initially?
when we pulled up, and we did have reports that the initial engine company reported there was only one person on site that was kind of they described him as a maintenance personnel, and nobody else was in the building. So we felt comfortable early on that we didn't have a life threat that we had to deal with pulling up. And yes, we made contact. We met with that representative, the initial, the officer from the engine company, and I believe their battalion chief, to start to get what was going on, what we needed to do, what the what the scope of it was. Obviously, coming into this, you don't know, never been in the building, never know nothing about their system or how they shut it down. So we're at that point, we're dependent upon the information they're giving us. And just to give you an idea, square footage wise, this building is 115,000 square foot cold storage warehouse. Is roughly one story, and so pretty good, pretty big building that this is going on.
Sure.
Chief, when you first got there and started talking with the initial engine company response for this small ammonia leak, what kind of metering equipment and stuff did they have with them? Did they take in when they first got there? Or
Kyle, the only report we got that they said they made entry into the building, had a very strong odor of ammonia, and that was it. I don't believe they took any meters in with him or did any initial metering. It was, hey, there's an ammonia leak going on in the building, and that was pretty much it.
oh, okay. Did they have from you remember from getting there when they first went in? I guess if they could smell it, they didn't wear any SCBAs or anything. Was it
my
go up and check
understanding
it
is
out?
they did not. They just walked in and smell, got the odor. The odor was we were getting an odor outside the building of just being, if you were close or the wind gusted a little bit, we would get a little. It wasn't overwhelming or causing any symptoms or anything, but it was obvious that there was a fairly significant ammonia leak going on.
Mm-hmm.
Did they say anything about having run calls there before?
So that's interesting, Nick. Nobody on the team currently that responded to that had any prior knowledge of this. One of my mentors and go-tos when we're running a significant call is a gentleman by the name of Mike Siegel. All you guys know who Mike is. When I called Mike, he recognized it and said the team had run a call here before, but it had been years ago. So beyond us, but yes, that we had run a call here. The team had run a call here previously.
Gotcha.
And early on, so this was the report that we received, and what we began to create our IAP and our whole plan was that in what they called the engine room, which was like their equipment room, there was a compressor, and that compressor needed to be shut down. And if we shut that compressor down, then that was the thing that would control the leak. So that was our initial thought process. That was the plan, and that we started putting together. And that's how we set up our initial teams and objectives and all of that.
Right. And we kind of touched on this with the first episode with the gentleman from Brentwood, but some of the we talked about some of the information that you get. You're kind of trusting the people that are telling you. You're kind of trusting them to be the subject matter experts, especially if they work there every day. You kind of assume that they know
Yeah.
what's going on with that. But I think, and we'll talk about this, as we go here. But you can't necessarily trust everything that you get from sources on scene sometimes. I remember I talked about the call in North County, GKN, and kind of how some of that information was hard to decipher and boil down to what we actually needed, and
Yes.
it ended up all parties were basically wrong until we got in there to really figure out what was going on. So it makes it kind of incredibly hard, especially if you haven't. Especially if you haven't been there. There's a lot of facilities I think in the county like that they could be ticking time bombs. We just have never been there, so we don't have much experience with that. But then you're kind of at a disadvantage, and then you get bad info that makes it really hard to operate safely and efficiently on these calls.
It it really does, and that is one of the biggest lessons that I have learned. Previously on the hazmat team, uh, I'm I was showing up just like you guys are right now as technicians, and somebody else is coming to me and saying, hey, this is what we got, this is what we're going to do, this is what's this is what's going on. Now becoming the guy that's receiving that information and helping with obviously a group and everybody as far as putting that incident action plan together and what our objectives are. I have learned that you cannot, while you want to gather all the information you cannot trust everything that is said to you as it being gospel. You just can't. That just because somebody works there does not make them a subject matter expert. And have done a lot of research and into the details of that Brentwood ammonia leak that you were talking about. You guys previously talked about. You can have people on scene that actually have different motives than you have. Like they're concerned about the leak and they just want you to get in there and take care of it.
Yeah,
And they may give you information that would lead you to make a decision that is not the right decision. So
right.
it was probably early on in this call, and we'll get into the details a little bit more here, but early on in this call, thinking we were making great progress, we were accomplishing absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So you get there, get some initial reports, then the resources start arriving. We kind of talked about this on the last, um, or the first episode rather, but was there anything on a building size up that you personally did or anybody did that gave you some more clues? Any kind of a 360? I know that's kind of difficult with the hazmat call sometimes because you might have a vapor cloud or something kind of blocking you from doing a full 360. But do you remember anything that gave you any clues or any help at all?
Not not really from just looking at the building. Like you could
Mm,
see some of the system piping that of the ammonia system that came out. We learned this was a 27,000 pound system that operated and cooled all the cold rooms in this building, uh, which not knowing, I've learned a lot more, but sounds like it's a fairly sizable system
mm,
that they have to do this. So we got to look at what we would call the alpha, what we labeled as the alpha side, which was uh, kind of the main entrance side of the building. And then we were able to get a look at the Bravo side, which was pretty much all bay doors, where they had a lot of tractor trailers, that kind of thing. They did not have those there. I think maybe one of the doors had a tractor to it. The rest of them were empty.
Correct.
So we got to look down those two sides of the building. But beyond that, we couldn't get around the Charlie side. And the Delta side had other buildings and kind of some exposures there. So nothing really outstanding from that as far as information that really drove us, other than trying to figure out access points, where we would go, what was the best route, and so forth, to get us in and out of, get our people in and out of the building.
Right. Get some access to it.
Yes.
With the 360 and all that, I know by the time we got there and what you guys were calling Alpha, where the hazmat truck and every decon initially set up, there's another big factory right across there. I remember trying to get tractor trailers and trucks out. Was that initial concern when you guys all showed up there with evacuating that building or getting that group of workers out of there? I know it was like when all this started off, it was getting closer to the evening, late afternoon time that they'd start be going home. Where did that kind of fall into place?
So it was a that big building is called Vijon Laboratories, and we just had about 3 weeks ago had a phone call for a leak in that building that turned out to be what it will not surprise me if we don't set up in the same parking lot again, fellas, down the road, because we're running a call at that building. That's got plenty of stuff. Kyle, we felt that with the building, we kind of labeled the hot zone as the interior of the building, and in the warm zone. So we had access was kind of limited where we were setting up in the parking lot we were setting up in. So yes, we did have a few trucks that more or less said, either you get this out of the way or you're here until this is done. Not anticipating how long that was actually going to be.
3 o'clock in the morning or
something. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I just shared the overlay of the picture so our listeners can kind of see what we're talking about here. So can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
So guys, if you're looking at that, and I do think that helps as we talk about this, Nick. So if you're looking where it's labeled Alpha, that kind of short side of the building there, on the if that white building on the Alpha Delta corner, you can see there's a little like walkway walking up to that corner, was a door that led directly into the engine room, where we initially were going to make entry in there. And then as you're going down like right to left along the Alpha side, you have another walkway that went to a roll-up door, and then down on the Alpha Bravo corner was just man doors into their offices and so forth, because all of those kind of play into what happened as we started our process of making entry into the building. Now, I will say this while you have this picture up. If we ran this call again, I would not have set everything up where I set it up.
Okay.
So if you're looking where Decon, HM23, Donning, and the command post if we would have had something would have happened, we would have had a significant wind shift. There was no way out. We had backed ourselves into a dead end corner. And again, anticipating like something's going to happen. If something did happen, it would have, we would have been scrambling. Yeah. So I would have set up on the entry road coming into into that kind of Alpha Bravo corner, just towards the bottom of the picture, where we would have had a way out if it was necessary. Fortunately, it worked out. We didn't have any problems, but that's something I would have changed if we could, looking after the fact.
Sure. So initial actions, get there, you're trying to set it up, get as much details as possible. You said that there was no victim profile at the time, or at least
Yes.
It was, not suspected that there was anyone in there. So at this point, the mission was try and stop or minimize the leak. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So those were, initial objectives on that. Getting entry, we did early on. The power company, Ameren, did arrive, and we had them shut down the power to the building. So they pulled. They did it at the pole coming in with where the power comes into the building. So we shut down power to the whole building, which I still feel was the right move, being that so we've got an unknown ammonia leak with ammonia's flammable properties. It just seemed like that was prudent to limit those going in. I realize those percentages are high, but we've got an unknown leak blowing in this building and contained, and it just seemed so. That decision, however, then complicated some things moving forward of access and so forth by us shutting the power down to it. So yes, we put together our entry teams. We had three. Entry team one making the initial entry. Entry team two, that was just backing them up, and then entry team three was considered our RIT team at the time. And so we were going to make entry, locate this compressor, obviously take readings, see where we were at, locate the compressor, get that shut down, and then go continue operations from there.
Hey, Chief, when you got there, did they have much information? I know you said now like the size of the system and everything like that. Did they have much information for you with the one site rep that you could get some of this information from? And then also, like, what kind of research did you start doing on making some of these decisions on PPE? Was there anything in particular, like sources that you were looking stuff up at when you first arrived and asking your
No, great question. No, there was not. And I want to be kind. I don't want to, beat the poor guy up that was working there, because it's ultimately not his fault. But the information was little to none. He didn't have much of, other than saying this is where this compressor's in, and this is you need to shut this down. That was pretty much it. Kyle,
if I could interject real quick.
Yeah, please, Matt.
I'll be the bad guy here, because in fairness to you, I think that the site rep was presenting himself as a subject matter expert of the facility, exactly where to go, turn by turn directions. This is where this compressor is going to be, and if you can find this switch and flip it, we're done. And so, like, in your defense, I think his confidence in his presentation of the information was really misleading in terms of your receiving that information. Like, okay, guy clearly sounds like he knows the building. Let's go get it. And that was the attitude. And I think it was the right attitude at that time based off of that information. So
Sure.
I just wanted
that you're right, Matt. As you say that, of thinking back, he did come off with a sense of confidence, and as what he was telling us we needed to do. So that's accurate. As far as research goes, we nothing earth-shaking other than the standard resources that have on our phone. I know it's kind of being phased out or limited because it's not being supported financially anymore, but I'm pretty comfortable with Wiser and looking it up. And ammonia is not an unknown, right? It's not some chemical that you can't spell or pronounce and have no idea what, you've never even heard of it before. It's a more common chemical, so it was pretty easy to look that stuff up and what if, but always never from a prideful standpoint of wanting to just take that for granted. Always have to go through the exercise of looking it up and confirm,
Yeah.
because those are just poor practices to get into, of not following through and looking through, looking that stuff, looking the characteristics of the chemical up to make sure you're squared away or not missing something.
Yeah. Assumptions will get you killed, honestly.
They will. They will.
So it's funny that you guys say that confidence that the so-called site expert or whatever you want to call him had, and kind of led you into a false belief that, oh, this guy, he acts like he knows what he's talking about. I guess he does. But that's funny that you say that, because at Brentwood, those guys said the exact same thing. They said, hey, we had a refrigerant tech on scene, and he's like, yeah, man, like I'll go throw on a pack or a mask or whatever, and I'll just wear an APR and I'll go in there and shut this off, and just let me do it. And they're like, nah, we can't let you do that. But the fact of the matter is, his confidence led them to be like, well, I guess, this isn't such a big deal if he's willing to go in there with an APR. But it ended up being not so great of an idea, unfortunately for them. And yeah, Niemeyer even said it in the last episode. He's like, yeah, I just had this funny feeling in the pit of my stomach, but I was listening to this guy talk and listening to his confidence, like you guys were mentioning there. And he's like, man, we just trusted him. We trusted that he knew, he's the expert, so-called. But yeah, that's interesting that you all mentioned that, because I see some parallels here with these calls. Obviously, it's the same chemical, but in more ways than one. So we got PPE figured out. So you guys went with the Frontline 500, which is a level A suit, but with some flash protection. Is that right? Is that what you guys chose on that one? Okay.
That was our first line on that. And I'm going to say that us going in, I think it was like, you just have to be careful of the false sense of protection with a flash suit, right? That there is and things that I have grown and learned with that of. So yes, that's the difficulty with ammonia, right? That you have a corrosive gas, so that equals vapor tight, but yet you also have this flammable range, and that's kind of a tricky deal. And I can go on and talk to experts right now to say, hey, we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't go in a level A because of that, right? I mean, there's different theories of thought, but that was the line that we went down, and fortunately it worked out for us. But there's people that say that not to do that you have to change the environment in order to get in, and not be in a suit, be in plastics. So right. Yes, that is what we did. We were in FL 500s that we made entry in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, that's the crappy thing about ammonia, is that it's corrosive, but it's also flammable. So it's like kind of the worst of both worlds.
It is.
So we get to the point we're choosing PPE, and we get to where we're getting ready to make entry. So we knew it was an ammonia leak, right? And we knew it without a doubt, basically, that it is what it was. So what did you all bring with you as far as instrumentation? Because you don't necessarily, and I'm going to bring this up too, we learned a lot about our instruments, it seems like, on this call, like capabilities wise. You want to talk about that a little bit, like what, and Matt, chime in too if you remember, like what you brought in first, and what were the sights and sounds of the instrumentation readings? Like, just tell me what you remember.
Well, I'll look. I'll start with that, and Matt, you kind of pick that up because you and Mike were the ones carrying the instruments and making your way in. So we're pretty typical, a standard right stale I-5 that we've got our papers, our a temp gun, some sort of multi-gas. At that time we were going in with, we had our multi-ray that we had, but then we also had a newer multi-ray light that had an ammonia specific sensor in it, right? And so thought that was appropriate of going downrange. So that was right, along with flashlights and stuff and all the things that they needed to carry in. But that was kind of the metering that we were taking with us, and I learned a ton from this call with what's about to happen.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it at that stage of the game, we knew we had a significant leak. I don't think we understood just how significant it was. I think my first inkling that what we were dealing with was this was like seriously going to be a long night was in that picture that you showed with that pathway headed to the Alpha Delta corner where we were making entry through a man door. I'm going to say somewhere between 3 and 5 feet from the door, our ammonia monitor pegged 100%. Yeah, so about where that square is, going down that pathway, as we were approaching that man door, we were in full alarm. And when I looked down at the meter, it was reading 100%. So outside of the structure, we were in an environment where the ammonia meter was already pegged and the meter was probably fried before we ever made entry. The other issue that we had was we were given the credit card size key to operate all of the doors, but the decision had been made to cut the power. So those were not working anywhere in the building. We had to use actual manual turn keys to make access through anything. So anyone that's been in a level A suit knows that dexterity wise, that is not a pleasant experience.
Right.
So, once we made entry, our team, at least when we're making entry, once we've made entry into the building, our command wants initial reading reports. So within 5 to 10 feet inside the door, we stopped. We kind of started looking at our meters. Everything was in full alarm. So as a technician, going down range, it was at that point that I knew, okay, we've got a significant call here.
Right.
Just to speak to that, right? So as you're putting an IAP together, you're putting your plan together, you're in a building like this, right? I want the guy that knows what's going on to stand there, and we're going to, if you got a map that we can write on, if not, we're going to draw out a map in front of our folks and to the best of our ability say, you're going to go through this door, you're going to take 2 steps, there's a stairwell there, you're going to go down the stairs to the right? I mean, you want to paint that picture for your folks to the best of your ability so they can get to where they need to go. So we put this whole plan together. Okay, we're making entry. We make all the contacts, let everybody know we're making entry. They walk about 50 feet from us, get to the first door that the whole plan is based off of, and we can't get the door open. So now it's like, okay, now what? And so now all the way down the front side of the building, down to the AB corner, which is the man door leading into the offices. And now in the dark, because we've cut the power off, that you've got to get in there and now figure your way out in your level A, all the way through the office to get all the way back to what would be the A Alpha Delta corner of the building, to now find this piece of equipment that you have no idea what it looks like or where exactly it's at. So from the get-go, there was frustration of like, okay, everything we just told them. Now those guys are in there flying blind, trying to figure out their way to get to what they, ultimately what we believed was the source of the leak, which was 100% false. So.
Yeah.
Yep, that's kind of where we were too. We went in a little bit later after you guys discovered the initial valve or the one switch that had to be turned off, and you kind of gave us you got 7 valves you need to find, but I'm really not sure where they're at, and kind of became a big scavenger hunt when we went in. And I remember like you had the map that we trying to look at, and same thing, as soon as we went in the door, it was like, well, this door's locked, not where it goes, or this isn't where it's at. And then there's also like there's a couple of the valves there on the main floor on the back side of that engine room that we think you need to break out windows or tear plywood off the wall, but we're really not sure until you get there. So that was the fun scavenger hunt for us, going in there in level A suits with me and my partner and flashlights and trying to locate all these things. But then I think it was the 1-2, I think, Matt, that you climbed on top of the one on top of the tank to shut it down. When we went in there, I remember the guy was saying, he's like, hey, it could be like a 5-foot ladder there that you have to climb on top, or it could be 20 feet. He really didn't know. And that's about the extent we made it before we realized that, hey, our air, we need to turn around and get back out. Because when we went in, we were pretty deep in the building. And then also the turn-by-turn directions of Chief Seers you giving us over the radio, because the map the guy gave us completely went to crap pretty quickly whenever we got in deep inside that basement in that building. So
yeah,
you talked initially or earlier, Nick, about Niemeyer having that pit of the stomach feeling, and I remember, when Mike and I made the initial entry into the building, we were basically, hey, if you can get to this thing and turn it off, great. But make sure we're reconning. We know, hey, what's the layout of this building? Like, try your best to remember the layout of this building, turn by turn, what you did. And I remember as we're getting, we get to the first door, it doesn't work. We don't have the key that we need to get through this door. Okay, well, this is where you're going to go. And the turn by turn directions, and we're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the building. And I remember at one point walking through like a swinging chain link fence type door and going down a set of steps. And now we are in the basement of this building. And we're walking down this giant hallway in the basement of this building. And when I say at this point we're 200 to 400 feet from the door, that does not accurately describe. We're 200 to 400 feet straight line. We are 1,500 feet left to right turns through 3 doors down a set of steps. And I remember looking at my air, and we were 50% ish. So I was like, hey, Mike, it's time to, it's time to go, because I'm thinking we've used 50% to get to where we're at. We have no idea if it goes south right now, we're dead.
Yeah.
And we are not getting out of this building alive. And that pit of your stomach feeling like, okay, like this isn't a pool acid spill in a parking lot. Okay. This is a legit ideal H environment. It's time to turn around and get out of here.
Yeah.
And both of us we hem hawed a little bit because we didn't, you get that pride starts gnawing at you, right? Get the job done. But it was like, no, it's time to go. And that sinking feeling of, this is legit. We got it. We're going to have a long night ahead of us in terms of, you talked about, well, here's this, I think it's behind this piece of plywood. Well, okay. In a 115,000 square foot building that is completely dark. Just, that was the moment for me on this call where it was like, oh boy, this, we got some work ahead of us.
Yeah. And I think
because I've pulled it up as I've been looking through some things this morning. All in all, your suit time on your first entry was 37 minutes.
that's a long time.
It is. And that's one of those, and we can get into it later. I don't want to derail it now, but that was something that and I've experienced this on several calls that we've run, as far as how we do RIT, how we take care of our folks or attempt to, has to change. We can't, we, while there is a point to this of, hey, there's some days on this that you're going to be in a bad spot, and if things go bad, you're going to be like it. You're going to be in trouble, right? I mean, it is dangerous. But as a team, we need to do a better job of putting people in position to be able to impact that and minimize it as much as we possibly can. And that's going to be like, and there's a learning curve to that of, it's not just saying, okay, let's do that. And we've done some different things on calls since then. But there's a whole nother level we have to go to, which is going to take more personnel on each hazmat call that we run to, that are going to be in suits. It's going to take more equipment. It's going to do all that, but we have to do that in order to be ready for the one day it doesn't go well. And it doesn't even have to mean that you've had a suit problem or whatever. You get overwhelmed by heat and you drop in the middle of that building, or you can't make it out, or you start having chest pain or whatever it is. Like those are real things. And I don't want to say it scares me to death, but we got to put the right things in position in order for us to be able to take care of our people and still functionally do our job, which there hasn't been too many calls I've run. There has never been a call that I've run with the hazmat team that I have been more frustrated and more proud in the same incident of the work that our people did. Not frustrated with our people, frustrated with the way things were going. But I don't know that I've ever been more proud of the work we did the night on this call. That was a a unique call.
For sure.
Yeah. Matt, you were talking about that basement and going down there. That was no joke. And that was kind of the eye opening for me, too. When we went in that first door, and we found that one valve behind a sheet of plywood that we had to peel off the wall in between the window that was removed. And we started down there. And of course, the one stairwell we went to was the same thing. And I remember calling Chief Seers on the radio. I'm like, yeah, this door's locked that you said to go down. And it's one of those, all right, stand by. Let me get the site rep and we'll get a different path for you. And yeah, with the lights being off, we actually took the partner I was with at the time. We had our little handheld stream lights, and then we had a pretty a bigger stream light that we sat at the top of the stairs, shining down into this black hole that we went into. And it was a maze down there. That's the biggest thing I remember taking away, is we went down there in the level A suits into this massive maze of the basement, trying to find our way back to this other stairwell just by walking around and trying to find this, and finally found that. And by that time it's the same thing. We turned off a couple of the valves that I remember. One was the king valve that we had to find, and we shut that off and then started looking at air. It's like same thing. We're at 50%. It's time to
go.
Find our way back out of this maze that we came through, and didn't leave breadcrumbs. So it was just making our way back through this thing. We got pretty lucky. That flashlight we left at the top of the stairs shining in there, I think, was our final like saving grace of like, oh, there's our exit of where we need to go. Because it was black. It was a huge mess down there, big maze, trying to find our way back out. And that was the biggest thing. Like when we got back up there and then going through decon and then realizing my Viber alerts started going off in decon. It's like, oh man, like this was pretty legit to be that deep into that building, and then realizing like, man, we still have to get all the way back out of this thing and go through decon before I get off of all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and you think you get to decon, or you think you get outside of the building, it's like, oh, I'm done, I can peel out now. But nope, you still got a couple of minutes at least of some good decon. That's if you got a squared away crew, which our decon people 100% are squared away on that.
Yeah, 100%.
You guys talked about a couple of things, and I just want to touch on them real quick. But just having the wisdom to say, okay, like this doesn't feel good. I think we should turn back. That's huge. I think, especially with hazmat and especially in a level A suit and just in firefighting and everything that we do, you get so task saturated sometimes. And Andy's talked about this in the classes he's done around the county, but you just, especially if you have meters going off, you're just kind of overwhelmed, sensory wise, with visual, audio, and you just kind of you end up tuning out. Me personally, I've experienced it several times, but I can't hear very much, like on the radio. Like I'll hear the meter if it's going off, but I say, hey man, did you hear that on the radio? And I said, hey, let's go do a search or whatever. It's like, man, I didn't hear that at all. Like, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to ignore you. I just did not pick that up. So that task saturation, plus being on a level A suit, plus being hot, plus being nervous, it's like, man, it's crazy. It's a crazy amount of stress that you're trying to sort through and also perform a mission that's kind of dangerous, and you're trying to compartmentalize that so you can do your job right, which is extremely hard at times. And the other thing I wanted to say is that despite your best efforts of planning and like laying it out, like, okay, here's our route, uh, here's the key to this door, here's the key to that door, despite your best planning, and I've seen it a few times on these calls, like something goes wrong and it's not your fault. It's just stuff that pops up that maybe the expert didn't see or maybe that they didn't account for. So now you're kind of sitting there in a building that's IDLH and you're like, okay, I'm on a limited time here. I got a limited amount of air on my back. So what now? And that just adds to all the stress of the call. So for you guys to be able to perform was outstanding, just like Andy said. I mean, that's huge.
When we finally, a couple things I wanted to share. So we, not to drag this out, Matt was on entry team 1. They went in uh, completely now flying blind with no plan, walking around the building trying to find the compressor in the haystack, if you will, and can't find it. But they give us information about where some things were. So entry team 2 goes in. They find the compressor that the gentleman was telling us about. They get it shut down. Okay. The objectives then was for us to start opening up and ventilating. Once we get that shut down, start opening up some of the overhead doors, start getting, there was a door, an overhead door on the alpha side, of getting that opened up, right? And we're really feeling like we're moving in the right direction. We get them done, they come out, process through decon, entry team 3 goes in with the intent to continue opening up for ventilation and doing further monitoring. And they locate in one of the far hallways down the delta side of the building. They report we have a super loud hissing noise still pushing from the piping above us in the hallway, and not one meter had changed a reading. Everything was still maxed, right? That was now, just pausing for a second on that, of as far as meters go, the first meter that Matt went in that had a ammonia specific sensor in it was in the multi-ray, and we then learned that that maxes at 99 parts per million, and it just says max on it. We did not realize that. So that was a frustration of, I thought we were going to get some true readings on that. Well, then I learned some other ways of how it operated. So that's our fault. When that meter went, when that sensor went in there, we should absolutely know what the capabilities are. What is that max at? What is, and that stuff should be relayed to your technicians that are going in, if to make sure that they're squared away on that. So that's a failure on our part as the leadership of the team, of not sharing that or understanding that, didn't know it when it went in. So now we're getting readings that are surprising us. Again, this further complicates what you're trying to do, or trying to support all of you that are inside working, and doing the work of us on the outside, trying to make sure you have what you need and the information to help walk you through something like this. So,
Right. And I think too, not only just keeping track as far as accountability is concerned in a command standpoint, but being able to help discern what's going on with the meters and kind of analyze your alarms and your readings, I think is kind of an overlooked responsibility of command too. Because, like I said, I'm task saturated in the suit. I'm hot, like getting a little frustrated because this door's unlocked or it's locked. I can't get through it or whatever. And then I got this thing going off. It's like, man, can you help me? like it's beeping. Here's what I see. So then you, in a controlled environment, at the command post, can kind of sit there and concentrate on that, just that one thing. And I think that's huge. I think as far as the electronic meters, anyway, I did a little bit of research getting prepared for the first episode, but it seems like the electronic meters, and we purchased the GX 6000. It's got a higher, the high limit's a little higher. It's around 435-ish parts per million, if I'm correct there. But it's my opinion and my thought process that you're kind of taking those in for a small leak, like determining if you have an ammonia problem or not. But if you're smelling it at the door, you might consider just like maybe dumping that, like take it to where it pegs out and say, okay, well, we are confirmed we got a major ammonia leak now. Because if you take that in farther, you're going to end up roasting some of those sensors, and they're really not going to do you much good anyway if they're pegged out the whole time.
And I think, Nick, with that then is that's where we can adjust it as far as the correction factor in it, but that's where we'd use like our just standalone PID.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So then in turn, no, we got to correct it further. You're not going to, was it like 9.7, I believe the correction factor is on ours. But you put that in there, set somebody up. We know what the leak is. We know what we're looking for. And we've got a specific meter that will go in and take care of that and give us those readings versus a bunch of that can go high on the readings as well. That can go much, much higher with that than going in with a chemical specific sensor. Now, clear in the building on the other end of that, when we're ventilating and so forth, I think those things are great.
Yeah.
But you're right. In the middle of it, when we're doing plumbing, when we're turning valves and climbing ladders, that multi-ray pro is doing us zero good with a sensor that pegs out at 99 parts per million.
Yeah. It's like okay, you've diagnosed a sickness with the electronic. Now you have to kind of source find and figure out, what organ system it is or whatever.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Talking about the PID, so we're talking about the characteristics of ammonia. So it's got what's the IP on that? Let me check here. I got it.
It's just below.
Yeah, it's 10.18. So 10.6 EV lamp. Obviously, we're within range on that. But like you said, the correction factor is huge. And what I did is I looked at the multi-ray pro, well, the ray PID, and that's got a certain correction factor. It's around 10. But I looked at the GX 6000 and it's got, I think it's in the 9s correction factor. So and the only reason I bring that up is, it's something that I say to our technicians sometimes, like RTFM, it's read the effing manual. So that it's all there, man. You just got to read it. So if and I'm guilty of not reading sometimes. I'm not perfect about it, but I didn't know that they're not all the same. It differs from manufacturer to manufacturer. So what you carry on your truck, Kyle, at Metro West, or what we carry at Creve Coeur, or what the team carries, you got to be familiar with your limitations with that, because some of these instruments don't function in low temperatures. You could get erratic readings. it could just shut off on you because it's got a certain battery that's not going to function that well in cold weather. It's stuff like that that if you don't know, if you didn't read the manual, you're not going to know until it happens when you're in a level A suit. So we went in, made several entries to try and isolate this. As far as exiting and going to the hot zone, decon wise, can you guys tell me what you remember from that? Um, if there are any problems, or if okay, here we're going to use soap and water, or what you kind of looked at to kind of help you to figure that out.
Matt, you could probably speak better to, as far as exiting and accessing decon.
Yeah, I mean, that honestly, that was super simple. It was within visual eyesight of the man door, the main entrance point that we were using for most of the call. It was within visual sight of that. So there was a palpable sense of relief when you push that man door open and you can see decon, right?
Yeah.
You're like, okay. At this point, yeah, you're like Kyle talked about, your vibra alert may be starting to go off, or you're getting close. You're like, yeah, but okay, I'm within arm's reach of no less than a dozen people, and so it was a good setup. I obviously, Andy, you talked about the hindsight, right, 2020, but in terms of for the techs coming out, it was a very short walk to get to decon and begin that process. So yeah, it was. In terms of the comfortability of your techs, it was perfect.
Sure.
Like, okay, I'm tired. I want to get out of this damn suit. It was right there, and you knew you had all the resources that you needed from that point on.
Kind of a relief, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know it is for me. I'm like, okay, I'm almost home free.
You talked about it earlier, Nick. The multitude of entries that I've made on the team. We have a Kirkwood Fire, which does the primary, most of the decon for our team. Man, they're squared away.
Yeah, rock
You
stars.
talk about a group of guys who have taken their part of the hazmat team very seriously. They're not looking to do more or less. They know that's their job. They can have that. I've seen it where from putting the truck in park and pulling the air brake, 10 minutes later, they've got decon ready to rock and roll. And they're very good at what they do. So, and I've told a couple of their team members over the years, like, when I see you guys pull up, I know I'm good. And that's to have that level of confidence in your teammates, especially guys that you're not sharing at the dinner table with and in a bunk hall with, to have that level of confidence in your teammates is it's a big deal.
100%. Well, and you think about, entry and recon is kind of like the holy grail, of all that. But the only way that happens is if we have a adequate decon that's squared away, or we have adequate command that's squared away, we have adequate research that's squared. Like, all these things have to be functioning and clicking and on it to where we can make a safe entry and everybody goes home.
And with our particular dynamic in St. Louis County, with a multitude of departments having their fingers in this pie, I think the team runs exceedingly smooth. There's no ego. There's no hero seeking or any of that stuff. It's a group of guys who, on any particular incident, are coming together to mitigate it in a reasonable fashion and get everybody home safe. And I don't think you could really ask for much more than that.
Sure.
Nick, it's something you had mentioned, the why behind decon, and just being fully transparent. A few things on that. So we set up a full technical decon, on this. And why? Because that's our comfort zone, right? Of setting up a full technical decon, and those guys do it so well, and they do it quickly, and it's all pulled out. But in after the fact, thinking about it, we're dealing with a corrosive gas. You're not getting product on you, right? I mean, you have vapors around you, but you're not getting vapors on you necessarily. You're certainly not getting liquid on you or anything in that sense. I'm just saying we set that up with soap and water, and it worked fine. there's some other options that we could, there's options with that of setting up fans
Yeah, just a dry
for
decon. Yeah.
as a dry decon. So as guys are coming up in their suits, they're getting more air to, across their suits just to help evaporate, get any of that stuff off of it. And that's good. That's good decon, right? So where we kind of went to our default, we had a big incident. We went to our normal decon and it was great and it was fine. But there's a lot of pieces there. Decon's a whole thing in and of itself, right? That we could sit and talk about forever of different options. That's what we used. It worked. But certainly there are other options to do that as well.
Sure. I was actually writing that down as a question. Kyle and Matt, do you guys remember ever getting any kind of liquid on you, or was it mostly all gas phase stuff?
It's all gas stuff when we went through. I never actually saw any liquid at all or anything like that.
And I can't say for myself on the entries that I made that I even saw any vapor cloud per se. It was completely a normal environment in terms of visual.
Gotcha. And then when you guys were closing valves and that, did you ever see any frosting or any kind of indication that would clue you in on a leak, like specifically where the source was at all? Anything?
No, the valving specifically, was an interesting part of this call. These different 7, whatever it was, ended up being valves that we needed to close to get this system shut down. The only way I could describe it is if you think of a small Christmas tree shape, perfectly smooth, bare aluminum, and so like, okay, well, that's where the valves are. Okay, so we just need to turn it and it turns off. Oh, no. You got to unscrew that. That's a cap to protect the stem so that the stem doesn't get broken. So you had to unscrew that Christmas tree, covering, and then turn the valve by hand with a wrench. Again, level A,
Right.
not always the easiest task. And you talked earlier, Kyle, about I remember specifically hearing the radio traffic of you guys finding the valve behind the plywood. And I remember as we were taking turns and through the entries, like each team was like kind of high-fiving when we heard another valve was found. Like there was serious progression. I remember thinking, like, walking past where you guys had been, seeing the broken plywood and thinking to myself, man, glad I didn't have to bust through plywood in a level A. Like there were all these things, little things that happened on this call that each team individually undertook that were beyond the norm for being in a level A, that like we were all cheering for each other. It was like, and there was this sense of each team that went in, it was like, at a minimum, we are going to get one valve on this entry. And there were a couple teams that got multiple valves, which really was impressive. But I remember each team, the mantra, the kind of the attitudes we were staging, getting suited up, ready to go in, was listening to the radio traffic. Okay, we got another one. We got another one. And then you hear these guys, oh, we found the one behind the plywood. And you're just like, you're pumping your fist because we were finally starting to make serious progress. And there was simply a sense of accomplishment as you walked past these valves that had finally been turned off, looking for the next one.
Yeah, and that was one of the bigger takeaways for me too. So for this call, this was you go through Hazmat Tech School, and I did that class quite a while before this call came out. But with training wise, with all my guys at Metro West now, we do a lot of training with our Hazmat techs and the level A suit trainers doing dexterity drills. For this one here, yeah, like you said, we come across oh, this valve is behind a sheet of plywood. We have to peel off the wall. And it was also behind, it wasn't as easy as oh, we peel this off. It was in between plate glass windows that we had to climb up on something, reach in, turn this valve, and then mark it with fire line tape to indicate hey, we found it. So in a level A suit, trying to rip fire line tape off of a off a roll and then reach in this little window while you're standing on a small step ladder to tie that off. And in this valve was not easy. And this was also one of my first ones as a company officer making entry in a level A suit. And I just remember like my left arm was never actually in the suit the entire time. It was always inside, because that was before we got on the team the new Scott pack. So every time like I had to talk on the radio, like it was pulling my arm back in the suit to my chest to get to the push button to talk, so I could talk to Chief Seers out in command and try and tell him where we were. So like my poor partner was with me, like had the bread basket, like I had the flashlight, but then also like I had the map on the inside of my suit with me. So like in this blacked out building, trying to shine this flashlight from the outside of my suit inside my suit so I could look at this map to figure out where I was in this building and where the next valve was at. And then I had to throw that away when we got to the door that didn't open, and start a whole new scavenger hunting challenges to make our way down to the basement. And same thing, it's like we went in there with the mindset of like, okay, we're going to find these 7 valves and shut them off. And I think we got 2. And it's like, all right, well, now it's turn around and get out of here. So
you closed valve 1, which was behind the plywood, at 2147. You found the valve number 2, which was the king valve, at 2159, and you closed that at 1000 hours, and then you were told to get out.
Yeah. Now I remember that's we turned around, we found the ladder that I'm not sure, Matt, if you wanted to climb that. Yeah, my partner's like tapping me. We look up and it's probably this 20-foot A-frame. My memory could be wrong. That was a while ago, but I just remember like looking at this A-frame ladder and where the valve was on top of the tank. I'm like, there's no way with our air level, like we're going to bounce out of here. But that was also goes back. I remember finishing up as we turned around and started going out. We noticed the stairwell that led to the other doors that led right to that room where that was at. And we got out. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. We went through this entire maze, which we had to get the other valves behind the plywood and everything else. But to turn around and be like, oh man, like the exit's right there, right to where majority of the other valves were, and to get up on top of that tank to shut the final one off.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a 20-foot A-frame. After you guys made that entry, it was Mike and I's turn again, and we suited up. And I remember fist bumping Mike and be like, we're going to go in and we're going to get this thing, because we're not leaving it for the next crew. And it was just, I remember getting into that room and seeing this. It's funny, the little things you remember about calls. The color, the blue color of that tank was just the super bright blue, round, 25-foot tall tank. And I remember Chief Digman had brought one of the system engineers to that door that you were talking about that was kind of on the edge of that room. And he was using a mag light to shine where we needed to go. And I remember looking up and looking at Mike, and we kind of just both put our heads down like, oh, this is not good. But it was like, hey, we're not leaving until we get this turned off. So we threw that A-frame up, and we didn't rock, paper, scissors, but I kind of looked at Mike and not to be too corny about it, but it was like, listen, I'm the senior guy. I'm going. And so we threw that ladder up and climbed a 20+ foot A-frame ladder in a level A and jumped on top of that tank, and working above my head, was able to unscrew that Christmas tree and I don't know if that was the final one, but we were getting pretty close to the end of it by the time that had to happen. But by far, in my 24 years in the fire service, the single most dangerous thing I've ever had to do. Just in terms of the limited visibility, if you haven't been in a level A, your field of vision is extremely small, and trying to watch your feet as you're coming up this ladder and making the transfer from the ladder to this tank, and then working above your head on the round tank in a level A, it was definitely a life altering experience. So, but we got it done. It was
just to put some reference on this. Matt, you made entry. You and Mike made entry as the initial entry team at 17:30 hours is when you guys walked in that door at on the AB corner to get the initial readings. You guys made entry into the building again at 10:13 when you made the next entry, and you shut that valve down on top of that tank at 10:44. And I will say without a doubt that you exited the decon. You shut it down at 10:42, exited the decon at 10:44. I will say without a doubt, in my 35 years in the fire service, that one moment of knowing what was, I mean, it was laid out that, hey, you got to climb the ladder, you got to get on this suspended tank, which also is round, move your way over, get to this valve above your head, and then shut it down. I felt like all time stopped, and I couldn't breathe. Like I have that was just one of those moments of it was amazing, that from a standpoint of what we did, what you guys did, on that. It was that was the move. If you ever watch any of the or listen to any of the Getting Salty podcasts from the FD&Y guys, they have a term. They said uh, sometimes on a call you have to make a move because that's what men do. And brother, you guys made a move on that call and on that part to finish this call out, and that's what ended it. That the rest of it was cleanup, was vent, was doing all the other stuff, but that was a move. And I don't know if you remember it or not, but you two knuckleheads, when you exited decon, the guy who was standing at the back of the car ran over and picked you up and gave you both a big hug. So that was that was a moment. I'll take that. That was a moment in my career that I will remember forever. So that was that was special.
There's a handful of moments in anybody's career where you really feel like, like we all know, 85% of the calls, we're helping somebody that's just incapable of processing information at a high level. Their light switch isn't working, their refrigerator's leaking, they've, whatever, the silly stuff that we go on all the time. But there are a handful of those moments in your career where you're like, okay, I really did it today. And that was one of those moments. And I will, not pridefully, I don't, the job had to be done. It had to be done. It was good. Whether, I remember having this conversation with Mike in that room in our level A suits. And I'm like, listen, man, if we don't get up there and get this done, then another team is going to have to do this. And we're not doing that. So let's get up there and get this done. And it was just one of those moments where you just try to not let the moment overwhelm you, and you go do it. The work had to be done. So we got up there and we did it, and I'm not trying to do one of these, but we got it done. And I'm very proud of that moment of that call.
That was gangster stuff. And hearing you guys talk about what, like, it wasn't just turning a valve. You had to like solve another 2 puzzles to get to the valve. Again, I'm just thinking training wise, like, maybe we should kind of add some dimensions like that, because that's what people are going to encounter in real life. We want to prepare them to succeed on real life calls, and that's what you're going to run into, so I'm just thinking kind of future down the road, like maybe we add, well, you got to get through this plywood first before you turn this valve or whatever and make it more realistic.
I do think some of the training that we do in level A's tends to be, I don't know how to put this, like gentle, and very technical and very like, okay, we don't put level A's on a whole lot of calls, but when we do, this is, you got to be able to function in them. This call was dirty, and I don't mean dirty in terms of the environment, in terms of, product on the floor or gas clouds. I mean dirty in terms of breaking plywood in
Yeah.
11A, right?
Like I would have,
climbing a 20-foot A-frame ladder. Like, this was just gross movement that had to be done, and I think there is something to be said for doing some of that in a training scenario where it's like, hey man, you got to trust that this suit can handle breaking through a piece of plywood,
right?
That you're capable of doing that in a level A. So,
well, get comfortable being uncomfortable now in training, because when you get to the real deal, it's going to go a lot easier, that's awesome, man. Hearing you guys, I've heard this story before, but man, that's every time I hear it, it's kind of gives me goosebumps, like pride and like, holy crap, you guys really were doing it. So kind of back to the Stay Alive 5, we talked about the electronic ammonia meter that you all had, but did you have anything else with you? Did anything indicate? I know, Stay Alive 5 was talking about the pH paper. That's supposed to turn blue in a corrosive atmosphere that's basic, which is what ammonia is. Did you all have any of that, those indicators? Did anything show up on that end?
I don't. I mean, it's been so many years ago now that I don't specifically remember. We did have the tongue depressors with the paper. I specifically do not remember any of the paper reacting.
No, I remember like going in because we were one of the later teams. I had the bread basket with all the meters, and I remember like very distinctly the same thing. As soon as we got close to the building, especially across the threshold into the building, like all the meters just started going crazy, and it was. And I remember Chief Seers like, yeah, these, just so you know, like they're going to be going off the entire time, and they did. I don't remember any papers or anything, or we were kind of by then known what our problem was, and
right,
sure,
task, like, here's your task at hands. We know the building's full of ammonia, but I don't remember like coming out and seeing the paper change or anything crazy like that from my perspective. But like Matt said, that was 4 years ago, I think now. So trying to remember everything.
Well, and in that, I almost, as we got started off on the wrong foot, not being able to go in the door, we thought we were going to get to go in. Then they're flying blind. We got a reading on a sensor that we didn't expect it to max out like it did, right? Not that it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. We weren't aware of what the parameters were on that. I almost think some of that just got like bypassed, of not even being like, hey, well, what's your paper say? What's your, you know what I mean? Being a known chemical
right,
that we had leaking, I think. And I'm even thinking, as I hear you talk, Kyle, it's almost like, well, at the point that we were in on that part of the incident, what's the point of you carrying all those meters? It's almost like we're missing I'm sending you in there to turn some valves. We know this 100,000+ square foot building is chock full of ammonia. We're not doing any good, other than, God forbid, having an LEL in there with you to make sure that something's not happening, the environment's not changing. Again, I know ammonia's got to be crazy high for it to be able to do that, but maybe worth that. But it's almost of thinking through, where are we at in the incident? Do we still need to be sending all these meters in with people? That probably a mistake on our part.
Yeah, we left out the part that the meters were still pegged after we brought in the truck mounted Mavis fan that attempted to ventilate the building. And because I went in after we had that thing set up and was running, and it didn't do anything at all. Like, it was still pretty high readings as far as I remember from when we went in after that.
It did, once we got it opened up and it was going. It took a little bit, but it did flush that out.
Yeah, and a lot of those meters are set up around the IDLH, which for ammonia is 300 parts per million. So, man, that it had to change air many times in that giant building for it to come down from what it was, I'm assuming, to to down, below 100 would have taken up quite a while. So Stay Alive 5, I was kind of doing some research on the stuff that we do have presently, and like I said before, like we're going into a known, and we kind of go in on all calls. We take the Stay Alive 5 and any other instrumentation that we're expecting to see some results, but we make sure that the results that we're seeing are matching up with the thing that we research or we think it is. And if it doesn't, and Andy, you know this, and you guys probably do too, Kyle and Matt, but we go ahead, if we see something that's unexpected, then we kind of back up a little bit, recalibrate, and make sure that we're proceeding safely. Because if you don't get the same readings that you're expecting, something's different, and you need to pay attention to that.
So couldn't agree more with that, Nick. And you said something as far as the technician being inside can be overwhelmed a little bit with all this stuff going on. Like I really strive that when we brief that entry team before they go in, that we brief them on what we expect to see, right? Like, hey, you shouldn't, if it's this, you shouldn't get a reading on your PID because it's this chemical, because the PID can't see it. And if you should get this, and we should get these readings, or this is what we're looking for. But I think that's the importance of the inside and the outside working together, right? By doing that briefing, we're sitting out there, and you may give me a reading and be like, hey, we're at 150 parts per million VOCs. Like, hey, we shouldn't have any I need to know, whoever's receiving those readings needs to be tuned in. That is unexpected. Let's, like you said, hit pause. Doesn't mean we got to shut it all down, but let's reevaluate. Why are we seeing that, right? We walk into one of our big chemical companies that we've been to numerous times. Well, what they do in general is probably a baseline of 50 parts per million
Right.
on VOC, right? You're going to get it just by what they do all day. So factor in some of those in. Doesn't mean it's a stop sign and we got to shut it down, but we do need to. We can't just arbitrarily be obtaining those readings. We have to have some thought in that as to what, and then what all those readings mean together, right? As they all come together, and that's as much or not more outside as inside.
100%. Yeah. And like I said, I was looking through what all we have for ammonia, and I did run across something here that I had learned myself, but we've got colorimetric tubes. So if you get those high concentrations, we're talking in the percentages of air by volume instead of parts per million. So we've now bumped up to, as you guys remember, 1% is 10,000 parts per million. So if we reach that threshold, you might want to go with a colorimetric tube, because that's not going to oversaturate, when you take it in, and it's not electronic. It doesn't require a charge. So it's just as simple as breaking the glass on each end, putting it in your bellows, and squeezing however many times the directions say. So we've got two different gas tubes for ammonia on the truck, and one is kind of the low range for like I'm saying, a diagnosis. Like, yeah, we have a little bit of ammonia here, which is 1 to 30 parts per million, and then the other one goes 1% to 16% by volume. So that would be the one to go to if we ran this tomorrow or today. And don't have to worry about oversaturation. If you oversaturate it, okay, I know for sure I got at least 16%, and you throw it away. It's not like we're spending $7,000 to replace it.
Well, something else that's significant about that, Nick, the lower explosive limit of ammonia is 15%.
Right.
So that like if you're getting if you're getting percent by volume, if that's what that's reading, and we're getting anything close to that,
right,
that should be sending off all kinds of red flags for us that we really need to be thinking about. do we need to be in there
Yeah,
to be able to do what we need to do?
what's the mission? Are we
What,
plumbing or?
what's our objectives? Why are we in there? What's going on? So that, I think it's something, I'm so glad you brought that up. I think we significantly, with all the technology we have access to, I think we significantly underuse the resource that those colorimetric tubes are
100%.
for us.
Yeah. And like I said, shame on me, I wasn't intimately familiar with that until I started looking into prepping for these episodes that I kind of discovered that.
Shame on you for being on vacation on that call.
Yeah. I remember we were driving back from my in-laws in Clarksville, and I was kind of deep in Illinois, kind of Mount Vernon, and I started getting all these calls like, "Hey man, where are you at?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm in the middle of Illinois right now." But
there may have been a small amount of testicle busting over the years that Nick missed.
oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. But yeah, so this is great stuff, and just to talk about the chemical characteristics of ammonia. Um, like I said, IDLH is 300 parts per million, which is pretty low for most chemicals out there. One thing that kind of does work in our favor with this is that, well, number one, molecular weight of 17, and that, as we know, if it's below 29.9, it's going to eventually float up into the air. I mentioned this on the last episode, but from what I've seen, on resources online and talking to other people who've dealt with this on a larger scale, that ammonia doesn't immediately go up straight up, right? And I think that's kind of a misnomer when we do classes and stuff. Like, oh yeah, it's 17, so it's going to go up, and all the students are like, oh okay, it just goes straight up. And that's like, no, it depends on humidity, it depends on the temperature outside, it depends on a lot of things, but it might hang out a little bit on the ground, and then eventually, as it warms up to the humidity and all that, it'll eventually work its way up, which works in our favor. The other thing I want to mention is the solubility of ammonia. That can work in our favor because we bring water with us. That's what we use on fires and everything else, and we can actually use that to knock down some vapor clouds and help us if we're dealing with a major leak. I don't know about so much inside, but definitely if we have an outside situation, that's definitely an option. However, I would put an asterisk on that once you start mixing water and ammonia, you start getting a hazardous waste situation where that creates ammonium hydroxide. So where's that going, right? That adds another, like, it's more manageable as a liquid, as you guys understand, but where is it going in a ditch? Is it going in the storm drain? Is it going in somebody's basement? You have to kind of think about those things tactically if you're going to employ
in a creek, in a river,
that.
right? I mean, those are, you're right. You solve one. What's the priority? You solve one, but you're creating another, and which is the easier to what's the best one to manage for the situation?
Right. If we're talking about an overturned uh, ammonia truck on the side of the road is one thing, but if you're in a building like you guys were, that's kind of another. Maybe water's not the play.
Yeah.
Not the play there. Now something that I kind of overlook on hazmat calls, especially, like, I know we didn't have a victim profile, but if you guys did run across somebody, just for me personally, I'm just mentioning this, but man, I need to have like a kind of a plan B and C if I do run across a victim unexpectedly. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, do I even have I even thought about that yet? I went to a conference at the beginning of June, and as you go to these conferences, and I kind of get this imposter syndrome. It's like, man, I just need to quit. Like, I don't know anything. And we talked about victims and even RIT teams and backup teams. And I'm like, man, I've never thought about that. And I, shame on me for not. But what did you guys have any thoughts about that at all when you were operating?
I'll be honest, Nick, we didn't. Not as from a victim profile, no. That it was we took that information that they gave us. That seemed to be pretty, it seems like reliable information. That he was the only one there working that day doesn't mean somebody else couldn't have been, I guess. But um, we took it for what it was, and we did not have a plan like, hey, if you were to come across somebody, this is what we would do.
Yeah. And
we did not.
And I'm not, not throwing shade or anything like that.
No, not at all. That's how you learn the process through this.
Yeah, and just for me personally, it's like, man, I need to start thinking about that, like have at least some kind of game plan if that happens. Because as we've seen, the information that we do get isn't, I would say maybe at best, it's maybe 50% reliable on the ones that I've been on.
Yes.
Probably less though. I mean, probably more like 20. So, and
this may sound awfully flippant too on considering what we do for a living, but my processing at that point was coming across a body in this structure at any juncture during that call. There is zero survivability.
Yeah.
There is, I'm not saying that there is, clearly we're going to recover. We're going to do what we need to do to get this individual out, but this is not a, hey, I just came across a body in a right-hand surge. All things stop. We're getting this person out for potential life-saving. This was a zero survivability environment.
Let's see here. I'm just kind of looking down the list. And there were no PPE malfunctions or anything. Nobody got hurt or anything like that, which is awesome.
Oh, we had one person from the decon side that got checked out on scene. I think they got a little overheated or something, but nobody was transported.
Good deal. And I think just speaking of unexpected victims, having a decon plan for somebody that's been exposed, and then a treatment plan going further, kind of expanding on that, is stuff that kind of opened my eyes to after this conference. It's like, okay, that's cool, you got them out. It's just like getting them out of a victim out of a fire. All right, you're halfway there. So are they going to die in the front yard, or do you have an ambulance there to treat them and take them to the hospital and save them? You did about 50% of the work. Just having those thoughts, for me personally, it's huge. So having run this call, do you guys have any advice for companies out there, listeners that may run across this, or just on hazmat in general? Any advice for anybody? Like, not even technician. We're talking anybody on a truck out there running calls after this call.
I know for me personally, the entries that I've made, any hazmat scene, from the most minor thing that we've been on to this call, slow and steady, right? Hazmat is a slow and steady environment, right? We are there. The Brentwood call might be like one example, right? Where it's quick, get in, grab, snatch, get out. Other than that exact scenario presenting itself, this is a slow and steady event, right? Let's get our ducks in a row. Let's make sure we have as much intel as possible, because hazmat by its very nature can be an exceedingly dangerous. It can be exceedingly monotonous and boring, but can also be exceedingly dangerous, and everything in between. So just slow and steady, right? And especially if you're an engine company responder who might just have, ops or awareness. Like, if you're like, all of us in this profession should have some level of spidey sense. And if your spidey sense is tingling, back out, right?
Pay attention to that.
You not going home, and back out. short of an immediate life rescue profile, and let the people who do this for a living every day come in and mitigate the situation.
How about you, Chief? Anything?
I got several things. That one, if you're kind of overseeing this, always be working on your next plan. Like don't put you put your plan together, you got an IEP together, you got the information, and you're going to start down that road. You should then be working on what do we do, what do we do when this doesn't work? What do we do if this doesn't happen, right? Like you have to start putting that in play. You hope the plan plays out just like it's supposed to. But chances are there are going to be variables in there, and talented people working for you are going to be able to overcome some of those variables. But what do you do? Like start putting your plan B and C together, high level of overseeing that. And because sometimes that's going to be like, well, if this happens, we're going to need this resource. Well, where do we get that resource? Well, let's start looking that up now before we need the resource. Does that make sense of some of that? So always be working on the next plan. Don't assume because they work for the company that they're experts. A note I wrote this morning as I was reading through some of this, I said, don't be prideful, but you must be able to stand your ground with your decisions. Our decision to shut the power off to this building, when we finally were talking to somebody within the company who was in Alabama, about who understood what it took to shut this system down, called me a complete idiot for not turning the power back onto this building and using their ventilation system to blow, to vent the ammonia out of the building. And, to me, piping that had been blowing now for 4 or 5 hours, and that vent fan, is that vent fan intrinsically safe? Does that, well, I don't know, but I mean, he's like, I know you don't understand the properties of ammonia, but it, it's not going to blow up. And I'm like, look, man, are you telling me that this thing's blowing for 4 or 5 hours, that at the highest point of this building with ammonia rising, that it couldn't be within 15%? Oh, it's not going to be. I'm like, I'm not turning the power back onto this building, right? So not prideful where you're not listening to your people, because I ran that by a battalion chief from the city. I ran that by our whole group, right? Of don't be so prideful you can't change a decision, but don't do it just because you're getting pushback from people on the call. And you need people on these scenes thinking through details. We carry a bunch of level A suits. We went through all of them, right? So how do we get more? How do we get more people? Supporting your personnel with just the needs of what turned out to be a really long, drawn-out call. The large mounted super vac fan that came in from a bordering state, came in from Illinois to be able to do that. I wouldn't have thought of that in 10 hazmat calls, and somebody else was like, hey, what do you think about getting this? That's unbelievable. So while we pushed back and didn't turn the vent system on, right, we brought our own vent system over, which kind of took care of it. So just knowing you need a lot of people thinking about a lot of different areas in order to support you guys that are putting on suits and walking down the dark hallway in the building. It's all got to work together. It can't be just one piece. It all comes together working, but it all has to point to what do you got to do in a level A suit to go mitigate this or to solve the problem? It's the people in the suits that it's all got to be pointing to, that we support them properly to be able to do the job.
Right.
And finally, and this is, we touched on it earlier, Matt, I'm forever grateful for what you guys did of climbing on that ladder and up on top of that tank and doing what you did in the atmosphere, just all of the variables in that. I will take that forever, that I did not have the right people in the right places quick enough. If something would have happened to you in that room, if you were halfway down that ladder and it would have tipped over, I didn't have people in the right places to be able to extricate you out of there in the right period of time, in a reasonable period of time, to give you a chance. You can have a ton of variables there, but all as I know is we got lucky. You guys were amazing on what you did. And me, as the guy outside supporting that, learned a lesson that I didn't have my people to do whatever I could to be ready if something went wrong. And that's a lesson that I'll learn and take the rest of my career, of having people in the right position to do that, because that scares the crap out of me. And if something would have went wrong that day, and thank God it didn't, I wasn't ready. I didn't have people in the right spots. That's tough to say, but that's about as true as it gets. So those are lessons that I took away from that call, Nick.
Awesome. How about you, Kyle?
Yeah. Like I said earlier, like I took a lot away from this call. This for me was one of the my first level A entries after going through the class years ago type of deal. I really started working with a lot of our guys at Metro West, and for us it's a little bit different because we don't have access to everything you guys have on HM23 all the time. I know since then I've had Chief Seers. You guys have come out multiple times and gone through company level stuff with our guys, all the way up to like our technicians and that's is how a lot of this started, was just going through and trying to get our guys to understand metering capabilities on that you guys bring with. And when you put one of these in our hands is go down range, like we know exactly what we're looking at and dealing with. So some of the biggest things for me is just technician level of working in that level A suit, like we talked about and Matt mentioned, like climbing ladders, using some forcible entry tools like a Halligan to pry plywood off the wall in a level A suit, and then just the dexterity stuff. So like having that understanding of like how hard it is to do like those, like Matt mentioned earlier, a key fob to open a door and work something small like that, or keys in a level A suit. That's some of the biggest stuff like I took away from there, is just operating in the level A suit and feeling like being comfortable being uncomfortable type of deal. And then also like some of the bigger stuff too for our technicians coming in, and once again not working all the time in the hazmat world and having that stuff there, is just going through like the briefing and setting up and going through all the steps before you go down range. So how to set up everything, because when we first showed up to this, it was one of those, we already had Creve Coeur and Pattonville had techs lined up getting vital signs done, and we kind of jumped in and started helping with that, helping with the paperwork aspect of it. So some of that stuff too, of just reviewing that and knowing like at a company level, like if I show up to this for the techs, like, hey, this is the steps that we go through. Everybody gets dressed at the same time. You get vital signs at the same time, and you work together as a team to go in there. And that's just stuff like if you don't do it a lot, that's all brand new to when you get first thrown into this. So some of that stuff for tech level was huge eye openers, and that's what moving forward, like just try to get that information out to your guys. So if it's other people listen to this that don't work for Creve Coeur, don't get the hazmat calls all the time and haven't had that chance, that's just something to realize, like going into a bigger incident like this. Like Matt said, it's slow and steady, but there's a lot of stuff that has to take place before you get in there, and just having that understanding of here's paperwork that has to get filled out just for you as a tech before you go down range. Here's the briefing, the information that you need to know, like Chief Seers mentioned, like, hey, you guys need to know all the parts of these meters and what you're actually seeing with this stuff. So, and going into that for like a company officer for a first new engine is some of our stuff is at Metro West, we started getting the 5 to stay alive on all of our trucks and really trying to get everybody out of the mindset, oh, I'm not a hazmat tech, I'm not going to have to deal with that.
Right.
And more of like, I've got thrown into this situation and I have to do that victim rescue. What do I taking with me to realize like, hey, this is safe? And then like Nick said, read the manuals. Like there's a couple of us that sat down after this call and really dove into what's the capabilities of these monitors. And it is pretty eye-opening, like whenever you dive into stuff like that. So I think engine company, I mean, those are the first ones to show up to this and realize, oh no, like I'm in above my head, but what can I do to start figuring stuff out? And then if there is a victim, is it something that I can safely put my guys down range to make that grab? Or is it something like, this isn't viable at all? I need to look at other plans and kind of go from there. So, but that's a lot of stuff like I personally took away from this in discussions I've had, kind of where I've tried to grow, and I bounce stuff off of Chief Seers and Nick all the time. Like, sorry if I annoy the heck out of you guys, but asking all these questions,
Not at all.
like that, trying to wrap my head more around it, and then more or less just pass on the information to our guys so they feel more comfortable with it. My lessons learned, try to pass that on so other people don't have to. So
Right. Well, I think I could sit here and talk about this for probably a week, but I think we hit all the big items. Unless you all have anything else you want to add, I appreciate you being on for the second episode. I think this is great. Very thankful for each and every one of you guys, and I think this is the start to something awesome that we're just going to keep building on, which I'm super pumped about. So like I said, appreciate you guys being on, and thank you. Thanks for being friends, and thanks for being awesome people and technicians. So,
I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
No,
Happy to be here.
great stuff.
all right.
Just a bunch of guys trying to make hazmat great again, you know.
That was good stuff.